This program provides education, not advice. Sponsors pay a fee for endorsements and interviews. See the truthayf.com disclosure page for details.
This is where technology, innovation, and personal finance come together.
This is the truth about your future with Rick Edelman.
Invesco QQQ is a proud sponsor of The Truth About Your Future with Rick Edelman. Want to rethink what's possible? How about being an investor, not just in your future, but the future? Well, it all starts with Invesco QQQ. For more than 25 years, this single ETF has given investors a direct line to the NASDAQ 100. That's 100 leading innovators behind advances in personal tech, science, and robotics, just to name a few. And you can access it all with Invesco QQQ. Let's rethink possibility. There are risks when investing in ETFs, including possible loss of money. ETF risks are similar to those of stocks. Investments in the tech sector are subject to greater risk and more volatility than more diversified investments. The NASDAQ 100 Index comprises the 100 largest non-financial companies on the NASDAQ. You can't invest directly into an index. Before investing, consider the fund's investment objectives, risks, charges, and expenses. Visit Invesco.com for prospectus containing this information. Read it carefully before investing. Invesco Distributors, Inc.
It's Tuesday, September 10th, and among all of the other political debates that are occurring in the presidential election, immigration is one of the top debates going on right now. And while we're debating immigration here in the U.S., South Korea is recruiting immigrants to serve as housekeepers to help ease the workloads of women with housekeeping and childcare duties. And as a result of all that, hoping that these new immigrant housekeepers will encourage women to have more children. The government plans to bring in 1,200 of these workers by next summer. Why is South Korea doing this? Because they have one of the world's lowest fertility rates, 0.68 babies per woman. You need 2.1 in order to sustain the population. They're only at 0.68. The president of South Korea calls its lack of babies a national emergency. The mayor of Seoul has warned of population extinction. And so the government's trying everything. They're paying women to have kids. They're building houses for young families. They're providing financial support for fertility treatments. They're giving tax breaks to newlyweds. They're building more nurseries. They're offering 18 months of maternity leave. They're paying for child seats in cabs, and now they're importing housekeepers to serve as child caregivers. Corporations are getting in on this too in South Korea. One big company is giving workers a $75,000 bonus for every baby they have, and two big banks are offering 5 years of parental leave for childcare. It's not just South Korea that's trying to get crafty. Look at Finland. They've got so few children that they're importing not caregivers like South Korea is. In Finland, they're importing the children themselves. Finland is recruiting elementary school children from poor countries to fill the empty seats in their classrooms. Kids from Myanmar, Vietnam, Tanzania, these kids will all get a free education all through high school. Finland says that by 2030, just 5-6 years from now, it's going to have 10% fewer 4 to 18-year-olds than it has now. Hundreds of local schools have already closed, and that means small towns are on the verge of disappearing. The idea is to import a new generation, since the Finns are not birthing their own. Some small schools already have more foreign students than Finnish ones. And while governments worldwide are struggling to convince women that they need to get pregnant, the Surgeon General here in the U.S. has just announced that being a parent is dangerous to your health. He said last week that parents are under dangerous levels of stress. A report from the American Psychological Association says nearly half of parents report overwhelming stress most of the time, twice as often as adults who are not parents. People with kids are lonelier too, according to a report from Cigna. In the face of all this, why would a woman want to have a child? In fact, 44%, nearly half, of women 18 to 49 say they will never have kids. And a lot of women are saying not only do they not want a child, they don't want a husband either. Men are saying this about wives too, especially in their 60s. People in their 60s or older are more likely to be divorced or never married than at any time in the past 30 years. 53% of women 65 plus are divorced, widowed, or never married, compared to 30% of men. Women outlive men, we know this, and older women don't want to be a nurse to a new husband as they age. They also don't want to jeopardize their own financial stability by supporting a new husband. So, more than half of women who were divorced or widowed say they don't want to get married again. Only 30% of divorced and widowed men say that. The bottom line, here in the U.S., our fertility rate has hit the lowest level ever last year, 1.6 births per woman. In the 50s, we were at 3.7. Is it any surprise? The annual cost of raising kids is up 35% since the 1980s. Family health insurance is up 47% in just the last 10 years. A middle-class family, according to the U.S. Department of Agriculture, now spends over $300,000 raising a child to age 17. And then comes college and wedding costs. That's per child. Parents are much less likely today to say they are financially secure than adults without kids, according to the Federal Reserve. In fact, nearly 30% of those who are homeless are families with children. So, it's a political issue. Kamala Harris says she wants to give parents $9,600 for each child. J.D. Vance says he wants the number to be $5,000 per child, on top of Donald Trump's offer to cut taxes to give families more money. So, it'll be a hot potato in the political election this year. And you know what all this means? It means you are less likely than ever to be a grandparent. That's the fun part of being a parent, isn't it? But only half of adults over age 50 are grandparents today. That's down 10% in just the last 5 years. Coming up next on the show, a question that I got from one of our listeners. Stay with us for more here on The Truth About Your Future.
Electricity, a big idea that's inspired countless new ones. From powering the light bulb to virtually powering our entire lives. 30 years ago, State Street launched the Spider S&P 500 ETF, SPY. A big idea that inspired the world to invest differently, and still does. What can you do with SPY?
Before investing, consider the fund's investment objectives, risks, charges, and expenses. Visit ssga.com for a prospectus containing this and other information. Read it carefully before investing. SPY is subject to risks similar to those of stocks. All ETFs are subject to risk, including possible loss of principal. Alps Distributors, Inc. Distributor.
Dana wrote to me a question. She's from Tayunga, California, and here's what she wrote.
Rick, you have advocated Fiduciary for as long as I have listened to you. Your recent podcast on this raised questions for me. How does the SEC monitor the registration? How is the ADV enforced? How do the regulations quantify what is in my best interest? Your advice is greatly appreciated. Thank you, Dana.
So, yeah, let's not get terribly caught up in this, Dana. My fear is that you're thinking that by hiring a fiduciary, you are going to avoid crime or fraud or abuse. I think you probably will, but I think you are looking for a proactive benefit when, in fact, I think it may be a reactive one. See, how does the SEC monitor the registration? Well, the SEC audits and examines RIAs frequently. I can recall fondly many an occasion where the SEC would come knocking saying, hello, here we are, show us your books and records. The SEC is very, very thorough in its annual examinations or biannual examinations of financial advisors. The bigger the advisor, the more frequent the exam. And the SEC is very diligent in examining all the books and records of the firm to verify that the firm and its advisors are, in fact, honoring their regulatory obligation to serve the client's best interests. That's how the ADV, that's the federal registration statement that advisors have to provide the SEC. That's how the SEC enforces the ADV. But you also ask the question, how do the regulations quantify what is in my best interest? I mean, what's in my best interest is an opinion, right? Isn't that a judgment call? How do you quantify that? Well, what you have to remember is that this is all a relative scale. It is RIAs, registered investment advisors, that are required to act as a fiduciary, required to act in your best interest. There is a massive amount of case law in courts all across the country, all the way up to the Supreme Court, that define fiduciary, that define best interest. And it is a pretty easy standard for prosecutors, for SEC examiners, for regulation enforcement officers to say whether you are or are not adhering to the fiduciary obligation. That is a relative statement, however, against stockbrokers who do not have that obligation to serve your best interest. They only have to provide you investments that are suitable and appropriate, but not necessarily best for you. And insurance agents don't even have to do that. All they have to do is show utmost good faith, which is the lowest standard of all. So this is why I encourage you to work with an RIA who is therefore a fiduciary. They must adhere to the strictest standard of duty of care compared to stockbrokers and insurance agents. And at the end of the day, if something does go awry, I think the SEC is most likely to identify it quickly because they are examining RIAs. They don't examine insurance agents. They aren't looking at stockbrokers. They leave that to FINRA. And if there is a problem uncovered, you have the best odds of getting redress when you file an arbitration claim or you file a lawsuit. So is it perfect? Is it going to prevent you from getting defrauded? No, it's not perfect, and it might not prevent it, but it does offer the best opportunity for redress. So maybe it's just the category of the best of bad choices or the least worst. It's the best we've got. You can send me your question as well. Just send it to askrick@thetruthayf.com. The link is in the show notes. Hey, today is September 10th. You know what that means? Tonight is the presidential debate between Donald Trump and Kamala Harris. And I think we're going to break a record for viewership of this. I think everybody's really looking forward to it. I know I am, if only for its entertainment value. I'm hopeful that there's going to be something worth talking about tomorrow as a result of what happens tonight. And if that's the case, that's what I'm going to share with you tomorrow on the podcast. So watch tonight, and we'll chat about it tomorrow. Also, today at 1 p.m. Eastern is my webinar for you on Bitcoin and Ethereum. How do you make an informed crypto allocation decision? Should you choose Bitcoin? Should you choose Ethereum? Or should you invest a little bit into both? David Alderman, the research analyst at Franklin Templeton Digital Assets, is going to be joining me. This webinar is free. If you're a financial advisor, you get 1 CE credit. You can register right now. The link's in the show notes. If you're curious about Bitcoin and Ethereum and understanding how they're different and their respective risk-reward profiles and a whole lot more, you'll want to join us for that event. That's today at 1 p.m. I'll see you there. And then on Wednesday, we have another webinar for you on the bond market. Jerome Schneider from PIMCO is going to be joining me. We're going to be talking about the coming cut in interest rates, what it means for your bonds and your cash allocation. 2 great webinars this week. Today on crypto, Wednesday on bonds. See you at both. You can register for both of these events. The links are in the show notes. I'm glad you're with me here on The Truth About Your Future. If you like what you're hearing, be sure to follow and subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts, Apple, Spotify, YouTube. And remember, leave a review on Apple Podcasts. I read them all. Never miss an episode of The Truth About Your Future. Follow and subscribe on your favorite podcast app. I'll see you tomorrow.
How do advances in science, technology, and medicine translate into investment opportunity? Listen and learn.
This is The Truth About Your Future with Rick Edelman.